Alright, yeah, welcome back on into some more Magic Arena, and this week, for our weekly deck series, we're going to be playing a long-requested deck and favourite archetype on the channel. We're going to be playing a blue-red Indomitable Creativity deck. So, Indomitable Creativity, for those who have not seen the Mana Burn episode, of which you should absolutely watch on the channel, is a sorcery speed, 3 mana sorcery speed with X attached to it, so it's never going to be 3 mana. It's always going to be like 6, 7, 8, something like that. Really high cost, but what it does is pretty much win you the game on the spot. In this particular case, we're going to be destroying X target artifacts and or creatures, and for each permanent destroyed this way, its controller reveals cards from the top of their library until an artifact or a creature card is revealed and exiles that card. Those players put the exiled cards onto the battlefield and then shuffle their libraries. That is a big wall of text right there, but what it basically says is we're going to generate treasure tokens, and with those treasure tokens we're going to destroy them, and for each of the destroyed tokens we're going to look into our deck and we're going to go find either an artifact or a creature, and as soon as we hit them we put them onto the battlefield. What that basically means is that we have a deck building restriction here, because we are going to try and hit pretty consistently an Immortal Sun, a Locust God, 3 combustible Gearhulks, and a Torrential Gearhulk. That's the plan at the very least. So we want to be hitting all of these in one go, which means we need to have the equivalent amount of treasures in order to do that. The reason why there's a deck building restriction in place is because if we run any kind of artifacts like Treasure Map or anything like that, basically that's going to mean that we have the chance that Creativity hits a treasure map instead of hitting a Locust God or a combustible Gearhulk, which is strictly worse than any of those things. So we have to generate creatures and treasures in a non-bomb kind of way. So Locust God creates red insect creature tokens, so we can sack those to Creativity. We also have Spell Swindles as well. Spell Swindles are a 5 mana counter spell, so 3 and 2 blue for an instant speed, counter target spell, and then you create X colorless treasure tokens depending on what the mana cost of that card is. So we're going to be building our deck essentially around Spell Swindle and Indomitable Creativity, making this essentially a combo deck with control as its baseline. So what we want to do is Spell Swindle something huge from our opponent, and then with the treasures that we generate, we Creativity out of our board wipes, and we do some fun stuff. So if we talk about how the deck actually wins off of all of this stuff, so ideally we're going to be hitting all of them. If we hit all of them, then we get an Immortal Sun, which makes our spells cost less, and our creatures get +1/+1. It's the bottom one that really matters here, because with the Immortal Sun in play, we're going to be generating some blue and red insect creature tokens with flying and haste. So they're going to be 2/2s for every single card that we draw. So Locust God's going to generate as a lot of hasty little flyers. Combustible Gearhulk helps with that, because this is a 6/6 first striker, which means it's a badass target on its own, but it has the effect of when it enters the battlefield, target opponent may have you draw 3 cards. If that player doesn't, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, and Combustible Gearhulk deals damage to that player equal to the total converted mana cost of those cards. So they can either have you draw 3 cards, which fills your hand full of counter spells, and also triggers the Locust God 3 times, which guarantees that there's 6 power worth of creatures hasting over to kill our opponent, just off of 1 Gearhulk alone. Or they can have you mill those cards, you don't get the tokens, however, it deals damage equal to the mana cost of those cards. So if we look at what's in our deck, a Commit to Memory is 10 damage, Hour of Devastations are 5 damage, Spell Swindles are 5 damage. We're not going to be hitting Gearhulks, Gods and Immortal Suns, so we can count those out. The rest are like 3 and 4 damage burn spells. So there's potential for a Combustible Gearhulk when our opponent mills for it to just hit them for 20 damage right on the spot. Because Commit is 10, Hour of Devastation and Spell Swindles, those are both 5 each. So we mill 3 cards, we hit a 10 and hit 2 5s. We just instant kill our opponent with a Gearhulk. So that's the thing that our opponent has to weigh up. Does he want us to potentially just kill him on the spot with the mill, or does he want to guarantee that he gets hit for 6 damage by making us draw those cards? Both of them are pretty atrocious for our opponent, though the mill is arguably the one to go for, because there is just a chance that Gear Hulk hits 3 lands and does no damage, so you got to take that as you are. But even if all of these Gear Hulks, each of them hits all lands, and we deal no damage from the mill, we've still got 3 Gear Hulks of 6/6 First Strikers and a Locust God, which still gets an upkeep draw, and we have a Torrential Gear Hulk, which can hit a Memory in the graveyard to draw 7 cards, or a Glimmer of Genius to draw 2 cards, which makes it a slightly less powerful draw off the Gear Hulk, but guaranteed, and it can also be used to great effect with things like Spell Swindle, Glimmer of Genius, Commit to Memory. Anything instant in our graveyard, Torrential Gear Hulk can hit, but really, the combo with Memory is just disgusting, because if there's a Memory in our graveyard and Gear Hulk comes down with a Locust God, that's 7 power, 7 draws going into play right there, which is 14 damage on an Immortal Sun as well with the Locust God. So that's kind of what we're going to be playing out to do here. So in order to survive that, we have a number of sweepers. We're running 4 copies of Sweltering Suns, because I have found that the early game aggression is the one thing that lets this deck down, so we are going very heavy on board wipes and removal as well. Other than that, though, we do deal quite nicely against control decks, because we're running quite a few counter spells. 4 copies of Disallow, 2 copies of Wizard's Retort, 1 copy of Commit to Memory, and 3 copies of Spell Swindle, and you can also count Torrential Gear Hulk as an honorary counter spell as well. It should be noted that all of our Indomitable Creativity targets are also castable in this deck, and are quite useful when you cast them. So in our old build, which was very memey and did some crazy stuff in one go, playing 5 colours worth of disgusting creatures, we couldn't really cast any of them. But this is where the advantage of this deck comes in, because just playing a Locust God on 6 can often be quite devastating for your opponent, same for the Gear Hulks and things like that. So everything is castable in this deck, and everything is good when you cast it. Other than that, we've got Harness Lightnings as well as our removal of choice. 1 and a red for an instant speed. You choose a target creature, then you get 3 energy, and you pay any amount of energy and deal that much damage to that creature. So your opponent can react to the Harness Lightning by pumping up your creatures, but he has to do that before you pay the energy. So if they do actually pump their creature out of Harness Lightning range, you can just choose to gain that 3 energy and deal 0 damage. So there's still upside for the Harness Lightnings. Should be noted that 3 power is not the ceiling for this Harness Lightning, not even by a long shot, because we have Glimmer of Genius, which is a 3 and a blue, instant speed, you scry 2, draw 2, and then you get 2 energy, which means these Harness Lightnings can then deal with a 5 toughness creature. So really good stuff there. We also do run 4 copies of Ether Hub as well. As a dual land in the early game, it's blue and red land. Also gains us energy, so Harness Lightning can hit a Steel Leaf Champion on turn 3. It's one of the real big problems with the deck is the Steel Leaf Champion on 3. If they go turn 1 land or else turn 2 Steel Leaf, on turn 3 we can Harness Lightning it away as long as we hit an Ether Hub and a Harness Lightning, which is not unreasonable to expect. But it can be dealt with. It's one of those that Sweltering Suns can't hit really, so it's nice to be able to take care of that. But that's essentially the deck as it stands. Go on to the mana base, shall we? We've got 8 mountains and 7 islands, but we are countering that with 1 copy of Memorial to Genius, because Memorial to Genius allows us to refill our hand, and it's a battlefield tapped, which is why I'm not running more copies of them. But it does have 5 and tap, so 6 mana total. To draw 2 cards as well. So with that Locust God on field, then it's an extra 2 tokens as well. Up to 4 damage, hasting out with the Memorial to Genius. Don't really want too many mono-coloured tap lands though, so we're only just running 1 copy. We don't often need it, but it's nice when we have it. I have 1 copy of Spar Bluff Canal. I might run more of these in the deck, but I don't actually have any more of them in my collection. And since 95% of this deck is rotating, I think the only exception is like Wizard's Retort, Spell Swindle. I think that's about it really. Everything else rotates out this deck, so I wouldn't recommend building this if you need to put a heavy amount of wild cards in, unless you don't care, because we have about 4 or 5 weeks I think till rotation. So I just wanted to try this deck out before we lost the ability to, because Indomitable Creativity is one of my favourite cards from Standard at the moment. But yeah, if you've got more Spy Bluff Canals, I'd absolutely recommend running a couple more of these over the islands and the mountains. We do have 4 copies of Sulphur Falls though, so that is our untapped dual mana on turn 2, which is quite nice. 4 copies of Ether Hub, which is another dual mana. We're never really going to struggle to get that 3 red or that double blue at any point, really, as long as we're not just getting incredibly mana screwed by RNG. We also have 1 copy of Arch of Araska as well, as most control decks end up happening. I don't really want to play many more colourless lands in this deck. Might consider a Field of Ruin or a Scavenger Grounds, but honestly, if you add more colourless lands in, with the amount of double cost cards that we have, especially as soon as turn 3, it's really not too much of a good idea to run that many colourless lands. So I've opted to go with the Arch of Araska, because I think being able to draw into your counter spells and things like that is just a little bit more valuable than taking out a graveyard, which might not be relevant in a fair few matchups. So that's going to be the main board. Onto the sideboard, we've got 3 copies of Magma Spray. So against creature matchups, we want to be bringing in Magma Sprays, Abrades, and Essence Scatters. Magma Spray is 1 red mana for an instant speed. It deals 2 damage to target creature. If that creature would die, exile it instead. So this takes care of Scrap Heap Scroungers. It takes care of the Dread Wanderers from the zombie decks, and a fair few zombie lords as well. There's a few things like that you really just want to kill and exile, because Scrap Heap Scrounger is the absolute bane of this deck, especially just in control in general. Being able to completely recast a Scrap Heap Scrounger as a 3/2, and not really much we can do about it, makes it very annoying. So the Magma Sprays are there for that particular card. Essence Scatters, if we're up against an aggro deck, it's an early game counter. It just basically turns our deck into a monstrosity of control. Counters target creature spell for 2 mana, which is quite nice. Against control, we bring in the negates. 4 copies of this for 1 and a blue, instant speed. Counter target non-creature spell. So we already have a pretty reasonable matchup against both creatures and control, but in the sideboard we basically just fortify whichever position we want to hit. We either want to go heavy control or heavy removal, and this sideboard pretty much just opens that up for us. We can't really run any graveyard hate because most of them are artifact based or creature based, and we can't really do anything about that, so that's why there is none in the sideboard. If I hit my Silent Gravestone, for example, which is usually the auto-include in a sideboard, we can hit it off an Indomitable Creativity, and that just does not sound like a good idea to me. 2 copies of Abrade for more creature removal if we need it, 3 damage to a creature, but also for artifact removal as well. If we're up against control, then Abrade is still pretty good because they do flash out their Gear Hulks. It's a 2 mana removal spell for a Torrential Gear Hulk. So it means that we don't have to run the Essence Scatters to counter it. We can just run the Abrades and take care of it. It will get the cast off of the graveyard, but we could potentially just hit the Gear Hulk beforehand with Wizard's Retorts and Disallows and things like that. Finally, just 1 copy of Spell Swindle. If we're up against a control deck, we might as well bring in the 4th copy of Spell Swindle, just because we're going to be playing slow enough as it is. So a 5 mana counter spell to gain us some treasures, which allows us to open up another counter spell, is never really a bad thing. So I do hope you guys enjoy the look of this deck. Be sure to check out the matches that will be on the end card of this video, and also like and subscribe the video as well. It helps out the channel a great deal, lets me know what kind of content you guys want to see in the future, just by analytics and things like that. So liking, subscribing on videos, getting views in, things like that, lets me know what you guys want to see, and I'll make more of it. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Do hope you've enjoyed the deck tech, and I hope you enjoy the matches that shall follow shortly after this. Alright, see you soon, guys.